with his hands out, not knowing, even processing what has just happened to him. And you will see him collapse on the sidewalk, fall to the ground. At that moment that Clay Beathard is stabbed in the chest, when he is stepping back, you will see his friend, Paul Trapani. Paul Trapani has just seen Mosley strike his friend, and he swings at him. And you'll see him swing at him, and you'll see Mr. Mosley lunge into Paul Trapani. Lunge into him, and you'll see that Paul stops for a second and sinks down, and then he swings again at Mr. Mosley, and you'll see Mr. Mosley lunge at him again. Paul Trapani walks, he steps back and walks away, and you'll actually see him. He has his jacket, and he walks away like this. His shirt is already covered in blood because he has been stabbed in the middle of his chest. Stabbed in his left side and stabbed in the middle of his chest and his heart. You can see the blood before he even walks across the street. And you'll see Paul Trapani walk across the street to that same area where Clay Beathard went, and you'll see him bend over. And you'll see him collapse there on the sidewalk. And then you'll see Michael Mosley calmly walk away, fixing his hair and calmly walking away, leaving Clay Beathard and Paul Trapani to bleed to death on the sidewalk, knowing what he has done to them. Leaving A.J. Bethram with his hand to his eye, bleeding on the sidewalk. He will calmly walk away. You will hear from the medical examiner that did the autopsy of Clay Beathard and Paul Trapani that stab to Clay Beathard, that it pierced his lung and his heart. That the stab to Paul Trapani in the middle of his chest, that it pierced his heart, and that they both bled to death. And you will hear from all of those people that were outside. You'll hear from all 8 of the friends that were out there, and not one of them saw a knife. Not one of them even thought that what was happening could result in their 2 friends dying and another friend being stabbed in the eye. You'll hear from those people that they don't know anyone else in the group, the people by the SUV, because they run into it too. One of their friends is over there, and they go to help their friend, and not one of them saw a knife. You'll hear from J.C. Harper, Daniel Sevilla, Sergio Alvarado. None of them saw a knife. And not one of them felt that they were in danger, because this was supposed to be a fist fight. This was a punch. It was pushing. It was shoving. There's absolutely nothing about this that one person, Michael Mosley, knew. He was armed with a knife, and he stabbed them in the heart, in the chest. I submit to you that you are going to hear from a lot of witnesses, and you are going to see video. And the evidence is going to show that Michael Mosley stabbed Clay Beathard. That he had that moment. He had that moment where he steadied himself and he lunged around J.C. Harper when he stabbed him. You will see that moment when he stabs Paul Trapani, knowing that he has just stabbed Clay Beathard in the chest. And you'll see him lunge and lunge after him, not once, but twice. You'll hear from A.J. Bethram, who will describe his injury, that he stabbed in his elbow, but he stabbed in his eye, that it almost hit his brain, that he has hardly any vision in that eye. And again, you will see Michael Mosley as he calmly walks away. And you'll hear from the detectives in the investigation that they spoke to the witnesses. And again, no one else saw a knife, knew a knife was involved, and no one ever thought that any of this would have happened, because it was just pushing and shoving and punching. And you'll hear that it was days later that the detectives got that surveillance video that day, and they were able to track what happened out in the street to back inside the bar, and they put up pictures on the news about J.C. Harper, Daniel Sevilla, Sergio Alvarado, Michael Mosley. And you'll hear that J.C. Harper went to the detectives and said, "That's me," and talked to the detectives. And then Daniel Sevilla went to the detectives and talked to the detectives. And the detectives were able to talk to Sergio Alvarado, that they spoke to all of those witnesses. And it wasn't until 4 days later, on Christmas Day, that they were able to find Michael Mosley, even though they had been searching hard. And they were able to charge him with the murder of Clay Beathard, the murder of Paul Trapani, the attempted homicide of A.J. Bethram, and the assault of Sam Folks outside of the Dogwood Bar in those early morning hours of December 21st, 2019. And at the close of all of the proof, we will ask you to return a verdict of guilty on all 4 counts of the indictment.
We've heard that Paul Trapani III and Clayton Beathard were jokesters. But the proof will show that the real jokester was a fellow named Wilson Myers McCullough. And this tragedy began as a joke. On the evening of December the 20th, Wilson McCullough hosts this party, this get-together for those friends from Battleground Academy, a private school in Franklin. And the partiers included Samuel Folks, Clayton Beathard, Alva Bethurham, and Paul Douglas Trapani III, Patrick Wells and Campbell Parker, and Ms. Tobey Favre and her best friend, Emma Yoder. They start drinking. We have about 6 hours of surveillance video from the Dogwood Bar. On the Bar 2 side camera at 2:24 a.m., you will see Wilson McCullough slapping Paul Trapani in the testicles as a joke. Moving on to 2:46 a.m. on the second floor stair top camera, you see Wilson McCullough and Mr. Mosley huddled together head to head watching Emma Yoder. Time after time, McCullough motions towards Emma, encouraging Mr. Mosley to approach her or to hit on her, as people say. Mosley one time does start to approach Emma, loses his nerve, does a 180 and goes back towards Mr. McCullough. But McCullough again exhorts Mosley to approach Emma. Left hand, right hand, kind of furtive movements, you know, holding a beer in one hand. This goes on for a full minute, from 2:45 a.m. to 2:46:45 a.m. on the second floor stair-top camera. And this is curious because Wilson McCullough and Emma Yoder have a romantic history. Now, I don't know at the time, maybe she was Sam Folk's girlfriend, but I guess we'll find out what he knew. But finally, Mr. Mosley does take the bait and approaches Emma. Wilson surveys the scene. He watches Mosley and Emma over here. And then he turns his attention to Samuel Folks over here. And a tall fella, I think his name is Campbell Parker, hands Mr. Folks a long neck beer. Folks takes the beer, upends it, stumbles back 2 steps, pivots to catch his balance, hands the beer back to Campbell Parker, and McCullough's over here waiting for him. And when Sam Folks comes up, he intercepts Folks. Folks is oblivious to any situation with Michael Mosley and Emma Yoder. So McCullough walks right past Michael Mosley and Emma Yoder, curls around to the top of the stair steps. You'll see him hang his left foot off the stair steps. He's there to spectate. Sam Folks finally figures out what's going on and springs into action like the jealous boyfriend he may be. And he confronts Mr. Mosley. Tells Mr. Mosley, back off, she's got a girlfriend. Mr. Mosley does back off. But Folks keeps berating Mr. Mosley for about 15 seconds. You can see it on the surveillance video, on the time code in the upper left-hand corner. 15 seconds plus, Mr. Mosley stands there and takes it. At that point, J.C. Harper does come back up the stairs. Mr. Mosley pulls her up, and she's his buddy girlfriend, pulls her up and lets these Battleground Academy people clear out. Then we go to the bottom of the staircase and we see Mr. Sevilla there looking up the stairs waiting for his friends to come down, Mr. Mosley and J.C. Harper and Sergio Alvarado. McCullough, Beathard, and Trapani pass by Mr. Sevilla, and they all motion up the stairs, so they recognize Mr. Sevilla in one fashion or another. And Mr. Beathard does a curious thing. He shakes his head left and moves his finger right, like telling him no. And we'll ask Mr. Sevilla what that meant. So anyway, Sam Folks hurries past Emma Yoder and then says something to McCullough and pushes Clay Beathard out the front door. Daniel Sevilla waits for his group and then follows J.C. Harper out the door. Then we cut to the outside on the front exterior entry camera. Sam Folks finally turns around and waits for Emma to come. He backs up. Everyone else is facing Division Street waiting for their rides. But Folks keeps his eyes on the door. He stops first. He stops Alva Bethurm, says something. McCullough's chatting up Emma. The sidewalk is crowded. Mr. Mosley comes out with his friend Alvarado, and they kind of move to the left. And in the camera there, you can see Sam Folks. He does this thing, and he stops Mr. Mosley again. And then Mr. Mosley moves out into the street, and Folks is still mouthing, and then Mosley hits him, bam, bam. And then the whole crowd of people, they move over to the right, and then they're kind of coming to the left, and a guy in a white button-down shirt, coolest guy around, looks at his phone, puts it in his pocket, goes over to this strum of people, comes out with Michael Mosley in a chokehold, and while Mosley's in a chokehold, Wilson McCullough comes in and starts pounding him multiple times. And the whole crowd moves to the left. It's crazy. and bodies go flying, including Wilson McCullough, who then crashes into Tobey Fawver. It's hard to believe. So at this point, you'll see like that, Ms. Fawver's on the ground, and then the last two Battleground Academy people come out, and one's a big 6'5" guy, David Bates, another's Patrick Wells. David Bates goes over and blocks off Wilson McCullough. McCullough's still trying to get into the fight. He's way over here now, but he can't get around McCullough. And Patrick Wells, also Foreman football player, 6 foot, 200 pounds, he goes and covers up Ms. Fawver and takes care of her. Then in the meantime, and this is at 2:48:39, you see a picture of Clayton Beathard holding Mr. Mosley in a headlock. And right about this time, 6'3" Alva Bethurum starts charging across the street. And then you get to 2:48:43, and Bethurum is pointing at Mr. Mosley and Sergio Alvarado. And that's on the front exterior entry camera and on the second floor west patio camera. Both cameras show both Beathard and Bethurum pointing at Mr. Mosley. So Beathard and Bethurum and the three men between them, including Paul Trapani, advance on Sergio and Mosley in a pincer movement. Sergio and Mr. Mosley, they start working back this way towards their cars. And at that point, Mr. Bethurum, he pushes J.C. Harper out of the way and then lunges and throws a belt-tie punch. And at the meantime, you see Michael Mosley back up like 2 steps. He's looking over at, I guess it's Bethurum over that way. Mr. Beathard's out in the street there. Mosley has his hands at his side. He's looking to the left. Clay Beathard charges from the street, winds up and throws a devastating sucker punch. Mosley crumples to the grass on the other side of the far sidewalk. And then Mr. Trapani runs in and standing over Mr. Mosley. And then a crazy thing, you got 2 wild cards, 2 Hispanic guys run from across the street and slam into Alva Bethurum's back, flattening him on the sidewalk. Don't know why. They're not related to the BGA people or Mr. Mosley. We can't figure that out. So then Mosley gets up and he strikes Beathard. And then Paul Trapani goes in, punching right, left, tearing the skin off his knuckles. Then at 2:49, I believe it's 2:49:06, Mr. Beathard, he just jogs back across the street, followed seconds later by Mr. Trapani. 2:49:10, you see in the camera that Mr. Mosley and his group walk single file out to go to their cars. They never see Beathard and Trapani go down. They don't know how seriously they're injured, but they get in their cars and go away. This is in the wee hours of a Saturday morning. And later that day, the news reports 2 people deceased. Mr. Mosley contacts attorney Justin Johnson. Sunday afternoon, Johnson emails Detective Beavis. Doesn't hear anything back, and telephones Detective Beavis the next day. Detective Beavis says he's busy. Attorney Johnson never hears back again from Detective Beavis. Wednesday morning, Christmas Day, Detective Beavis and a SWAT team arrest Mr. Mosley out in Williamson County. 4 days later, Sunday, December 29, Detective Beavis is out at Battleground Academy in their library interviewing those people. He interviews Wilson McCullough. Ask specifically if McCullough witnessed any interactions between Mr. Mosley and anyone in the BGA group. I didn't see anything happen inside the bar, says McCullough. I didn't see anyone get approached. And you, ladies and gentlemen, will be the judge of the truthfulness of Wilson McCullough. Thank you.
We have counsel approach for just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 4:15. It's probably a good time for us to break. Let me take this on myself. I don't doubt it. You can hear me well. It's 4:15. It's probably a good time for us to break right now, rather, because I think if we call somebody, it may take us, beyond. I do want to ask you some questions regarding our time frame for the rest of the week. And I don't want to put any of you under any pressure. I understand that you have families that you have to get home to, or that you may have morning issues. Sometimes if we start a few minutes early, sometimes I like to start about 8:30. That kind of gives us a kind of an extra 30-minute start of the day. That gets us an opportunity to get more proof in, get more work done. Is there anyone? And if it's a problem, don't be afraid to say so, because I understand that you have families that you have to, and other issues. Is there anyone who cannot be here at about 8:15 so that we could start at 8:30? Let's try to get here at about 8:15 so that we can start at 8:30. Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to ask you is, and I know this was your first day, so I did not give you an opportunity to address any issues. We sometimes try to go as close to 5 o'clock as possible. There may be some times that we can go a little later than 5. But again, I understand that you have things that you have to do. Is there anyone who cannot stay till at least 5 o'clock every day? And I'll gauge it again as we move each day and just ask if the time needs to be adjusted. But I thank you for I appreciate your flexibility as we try to get through as much of this as possible. Mr. Fox and Ms. Adams will give you some instructions as you leave. Now, it is imperative that I remind you that you cannot talk about, you've heard the opening statements on both sides, so now you know a little bit about the case. You need to understand that you cannot talk about this case with anybody. not among yourselves as you break off, as you get ready, as you gather in the jury room. You can't talk about it among yourselves. You can't talk about it with family and friends. You cannot do any outside research. As I've shared with you, and as you can probably tell, this case has garnered media attention. You're not captured, don't worry. But do not, I don't know, if you get those, you may want to see, if you get those push notifications on your phone, you may want to just, for this week, disable them. I couldn't tell you how to do that on the least when it comes to technology. But you may want to disable those push notifications because you cannot gather any of that information from the media. If you go home and watch the news tonight, I don't know. I wish I could tell you not to watch the news. I know that's what you get, but you cannot learn anything about this case from any other source other than what comes from the witness stand, and that is so important that we do that, okay? All right, thank you so much, Ms.
All right.
All right, we'll maybe see it. All right, before I address Mr. Alvarado, is there anything else I need to talk about with the state? Mr. Portland?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, ask Mr. Alvarado to come in.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes. Oh, you went home? Okay, all right. Mr. Cameraman, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Bud.
Bud?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to refer to you as Bud, because that just seems so not right, but Bud, as I've shared with you, there is a witness who has some safety concerns about capturing his image on video, and out of respect for his concerns, I'm going to ask that you not capture this witness's image on video. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. Come up to the podium, sir, right here, please. Thank you. Mr. Alvarado, we tried really hard to try to get through as much evidence as we could today, and unfortunately, we were not able to get to your testimony. You are still under subpoena. That is a court order for you to be here. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Where will you be tomorrow morning at 8:30?
Yeah.
You're going to be here.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. It is important that you understand that you must answer that subpoena, because I don't want to have to take the next measures, which I will do if I have to. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any questions for the state? Mr. Quillen?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll see you. We're going to try to start at 8:30 in the morning, because the earlier we start, the more we can get through, okay? All right, thank you, sir. Okay, is there anything else? I guess I should have asked y'all. I didn't think to ask y'all that I can't start at 8:30 if you all aren't here. Is that going to be a problem?
Judge, we absolutely will be here.
Mr. Quillen?
We're early risers.
Okay, I know. All right. If there's nothing else, court will stand adjourned until 8:30 in the morning.
All right. Court stands adjourned to 8:30 Tuesday morning. We got this.